We're excited to have you here for our webinar today to talk about strategies for managing client debt. Consumer debt and its impact on financial planning is a topic that affects nearly every household in some way. So with debt levels at historic highs, effective budgeting has become more important than ever. So many individuals are finding themselves without adequate emergency savings, which often leads to relying on credit cards to cover unexpected expenses. So in today's session, we'll look at how to guide clients through prioritizing high interest debt while also addressing the growing need for education around debt and budgeting. We'll also touch on how debt can quietly delay retirement goals and why more financial professionals are weaving debt management into their planning. So just a few housekeeping items before we jump in. This session is being recorded and we will send you a copy shortly after the webinar ends. And we will also have a Q&A session at the very end. So please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar, and then we will have time to walk through them at the end. So first thing I want to start off with today is just highlighting some key stats related to debt. Let me jump over here. So first off, credit card debt. The average credit card balance per borrower is just around $6,200 with an average APR of around 20.5%. That is historically high. And 47% of consumers are carrying a balance month to month. Student loans, fan favorite or everyone's favorite topic. The average student loan balance is around $37,000 per borrower, with just over 43 million borrowers having that federal student loan. Auto loans, on average, that balance is $23,000. And then the average monthly payment for a new car is around $738 a month. And then lastly, mortgage debt, the average being around $236,000. So just wanted to highlight some of those stats to show truly how important it is to manage this debt effectively and just how quickly it can all add up. So I am going to switch over to my advisor portal in RightCapital. So just switching over here, I am logged in to my client plan. Today, I'm working on the fan favorite, Adam and Jackie Sandler. So first place I want to start off in RightCapital is just going to their profile blueprint. I just want to give you a quick overview of what this client plan looks like and what we'll really be talking about today. So first up, this is Adam and Jackie. I did knock a few years off of Adam Sandler. So in today's world, he is 44 years old and his co-client Jackie is 40. So a lot of standard data entry points here in the profile blueprint. Here we have some bank account information, credit cards. We do have their primary home with just around $475,000. We have standard 401k and investment information. And then towards the bottom, we do have some debt entered into the plan. So just a quick overview, a lot of just standard information that we see entered across a lot of client plans. And their net worth is just shy of $900,000, and that is including that primary home. And then lastly, in the profile blueprint, just want to highlight some income, savings, and expenses as well. So they both have a salary entered. We have their estimated Social Security. We have the standard 401k contributions. And then our pre-retirement living expenses are just around $7,500 a month. So just wanted to give you a quick overview. Again, I'm at the very kind of top right of the advisor portal, in the client plan profile blueprint, and then just a quick rundown of the client plan today. So first up, I'm going to start the presentation today in our debt module. So our debt module is located at the very top right of my screen. We call this our More menu, or right next to profile is those three dots, and then clicking into debt. So here we have our debt module. This is really used to strategize client debt repayment. So this module allows for refinancing scenarios, adjusting payment priorities, and then modeling additional monthly payments to accelerate debt elimination. So here, before we make any proposals, this is our debt management tab. And then our current, this graph really just starts to show the current debt pay down. So here we just have current, and it will just run through. This is all based on the information we have entered in the client's profile, net worth, and the initial data entry points. So this module is driven by the action items down below. So on the strategy tab, scrolling down just a little bit, clicking into action items, and then here we have multiple things we could do. So I would say the most impactful item in this module is to show the client different payment priorities. So on the left-hand side of my page, under proposed payment strategy, our first option is payment priorities. So this is where I can highlight a debt avalanche strategy, for example. So if I wanted to show the client the impact of paying the highest to lowest interest rate, or maybe a debt snowball strategy where I'm paying off the lowest to highest balance, or I can just keep all the same priority for all debt. So in other words, just keeping the same payments that we've already entered. So for example, if I wanted to show them looking at highest to lowest interest rate, I can switch over and then scroll down to the very bottom right and click refresh. And here we go. And then here, this graph will automatically update. And if I were to shift the client's payment priorities from highest to lowest interest rate, on the right-hand side of the screen, we'll see that the client would have a total savings of around $70,000 and be debt-free 528 months sooner. So very impactful there, really just shifting that payment priority can make a big difference. And then we could use that $70,000 to fund a specific goal or fund education, for example. So that can really move the needle. So let's say I also want to look at lowest highest balance. I can switch over again down below in the action items, looking at different payment priorities, and then scrolling all the way down to the very bottom and pressing refresh. So it's very easy in person or if you're presenting to the client or talking through this on Zoom, it's really easy to have that fluid conversation to show them really quickly what the difference is between the two options. And then on the right-hand side of the page, we'll see if we were to go lowest highest balance, we'd have a total savings of around $56,000 and be debt-free at 525 months sooner. A lot of helpful visuals there and really, really nice to talk through the client. It's really easy to show that. So let's say we like the highest to lowest interest rate, and then I'm meeting with Adam and Jackie and they say, well, I have an additional $500 a month that I'd really like to see what would happen if I redirected that to pay down these loans. So right below the payment priority, I can also show a proposed additional monthly payment. So let's say we have that additional $500. I can use that slider, or I can just enter that dollar figure. And again, scrolling down, pressing refresh, and then I can see along with that new payment priority, let's also add that additional cash flow into paying the debt down sooner. So then here we have a total savings of $82,000 and then even debt-free even sooner. And then again, very easy to make adjustments to that. So if they're like, oh, 500 looks awesome, maybe I can stretch it to 600, how much more would that save me? So again, really easy to make adjustments and show the client the value of really changing that payment priority or shifting available cash flows to pay down their debt sooner. And then lastly, this module is also very popular to show the impacts of refinancing. So right below the payment priority and that proposed additional monthly payment, we have all of the individual loans that we have entered into the plan. And then on the right-hand side of the page, we have our strategy column. So what this will allow you to do is either factor it into that proposed payment strategy that, again, right above that payment priority and that additional $600 a month. If you would like to remove that from the proposal, you can switch over to keep current payments, and then we'll just treat it exactly how you've entered it in the profile section. So we are removing it from paying it highest to lowest interest rate and factoring additional cash flow into that. So basically, this is how you exclude it from that new proposal. And then lastly, very popular is to show the refinance. So once I select refinance, on the right-hand side of the page, we'll have three fields. First is cost, then term, then rate. The cost is the actual cost to do the refinance. So for example, if I'm refinancing Adam's card, let's say the credit card company charges an additional $500 to do the balance transfer, for example. So I'd enter the actual cost to do the refinance and then the new term and the new rate. So let's say now it's let's just say 5 years, and then instead of 15, they had a special promotion for 7, for example. And then again, just pressing refresh and then immediately seeing the impact of what would happen. So again, 3 main components to this strategy tab, again, driven by the action items down below, is to first look at payment priorities, whether that's the avalanche or snowball strategy. Then maybe the clients have that additional cash flow that they're wanting to put towards paying down their debt sooner. And then lastly, under individual loan strategy, Do I want to factor it into that proposed payment strategy? Do I want to remove it? Or do I want to show the impacts of refinancing? And then just one more time, cost is the actual cost to do the refinance. Term and rate are just the new refinancing terms. So that is the action items in the strategy. So again, really helpful visuals. This is a great starting point in the module. And then on the right-hand side, we have 3 tabs, our strategy, payment, and details. So strategy is where we build out that proposal. And then the payment tab here is going to show those proposed payments for next month. So what would the client actually need to do to get to that point? So it shows all of the individual debt that we have entered, balance, rate, minimum payment, current payment, and then that new proposed payment. Again, to get them to that spot that we just saw on the strategy tab. And then lastly, we have our details tab. So this will isolate each individual loan and give just great information on kind of the pay down strategy. So balance, interest rate, payment, and then the ending balance. So on the left-hand side, I can see all of the individual loans that I have entered. And then I can also view this on an annual or monthly schedule. And then lastly, I always just like to point out right above the monthly, we have a little download button. If it's easier to export this as a CSV file, you can also do that here as well. So again, whenever you see this little downward download button in RightCapital, it just exports the data you see on the page to a CSV file. So again, just lastly, we are in the More menu up at the very top, debt module, strategy, great place to show the clients really looking at that top interest rate, getting that paid down sooner, and then focusing on, savings in the long term. So once the proposal has been built out in the debt tab, so we're in a really good spot. We want to change that payment priority. We want to shift that additional $600. The next place advisors will go is up at the very top of my screen. I'm going to click into the retirement tab. So up in the retirement tab, first thing here is our analysis. So then once we build out a debt proposal, we can bring it into our proposed plan here to see how does that new debt proposal impact the entirety of the plan. So again, I'm in retirement and then analysis. And then within our probability tab, if I scroll down towards the bottom, and then in our action items on the right-hand side of the page, we have our strategies. And then we'll have our debt strategy here. So if I click on this current payment dropdown, we'll see an option for debt proposal. And what that's doing is bringing the proposal we just built out in the debt module and tying it back into the client's proposed plan. So now I can run that proposal through the Monte Carlo analysis to see what impact does that have for the entirety of the plan. So on the left-hand side, I can now see what is happening if I bring in that debt proposal. If you do not see the debt strategy in the action items, all you have to do is scroll down to the very bottom, and on the right-hand side of the page, just click into edit. And then on the right-hand side of the add or remove action items, you will see all of the various strategies. And then you just have to select debt. Once I check that off, press save, and then you will see it on the strategies tab on the right-hand side of the page. And again, switching on debt proposal brings over all the work we did in the debt module, which by itself is a standalone module, but now I can bring it back into the client's proposed plan to really show them if we're building out any other what if scenarios, or if I just wanted to see how does that debt proposal factor into the Monte Carlo analysis, what that would do for the overall plan. So again, I just want to show that one more time. I know there's kind of moving parts there, but again, our starting point was at the very top right of my screen, clicking into the More menu, the debt module. And then here, first step is to really build out that what if proposal here with the client to say, what would it look like if we looked at the payment priorities and really built everything out here. And then once we're kind of a check mark on this module, I can bring it all the way back to the retirement tab up at the very top of the screen. And then in our analysis section, probability, scroll down, and then on the right-hand side, factor in that debt strategy, debt proposal. So that is the first step in the retirement analysis of where advisors go with the kind of managing those debt proposals with clients. The next one is to also show the client making extra debt payments. So another thing that we can do here in the action items on the very far right of my screen at the very very bottom, I'm going to click into edit again. And then here I am in the add or remove action items. And at the very bottom left of this drawer, I can click on this blue add new items. And then under expenses, we have an extra debt payment. So then once I click into that card, I can title this whatever I'd like. So if I wanted to show the client making, a very popular one is making extra mortgage payments, I can click into it, I can name that expense. And then let's say that the client wants to look at the impact of paying, let's just say $500 more a month towards their mortgage. So I just put that amount here. Owner, I can say, is it client, co-client, or in this case, a mortgage would be owned jointly here. And then lastly, the debt is I want to tie it to the mortgage itself. So again, under debt, we'd see all of the different debt options that we have entered, and then I would be selecting joint mortgage. Is this a one-time $500 payment, or is this recurring? So if I wanted to make that recurring, let's say from next year, 2026 to let's say 2035, for example, I want to show the clients making an additional $500 payment towards their mortgage. And then I just press save. And this gets added again only to the proposed plan I'm working on. So this does not get added to that current plan. And then on the left-hand side of my action items, towards the very bottom under expenses, I would see that extra debt payment. We'll see that $500. I can always click into it to make additional changes. And then you'll see right next to this $500 in the current plan column, it is not impacting the current plan. So a lot of advisors will set up different expenses here to show the client the impact of shifting that payment priority. And I'm sorry, I think my internet is going a little off. Let me just reconnect this. Sorry if it's a little glitchy. My computer wants to go into full weekend mode. And I think I'm back. Okay. So I just want to show that one more time. Again, I know it's a little bit of clicks. We have a lot of help center content that goes over this in a lot of detail. Again, implementing that debt strategy, using that debt proposal, but also factoring in extra debt payments. So if I want to show that if the client is interested in looking at making extra debt payments to specific loans that we have entered, that can be done in the up at the very top, retirement analysis. Under the probability tab, where we build out those what if proposals, I scroll down to the action items, go all the way down to the very bottom right, click into that edit. That's where we can add or remove those different action items. And then the blue add new items will only ever impact the proposed plan that you're working on. So then I can click into expenses, then hover over extra debt payment. And then here I can even leave this amount at 0 if I'm just looking at to put in different figures, but I just add that card, tie it to that specific debt. And then within the action items, I can always make different adjustments, whether that's one-time or recurring payments, but this can be another really great conversation to show the client the total overall impact of paying down debt and taking more available cash flow to actually pay down the debt. So again, on the left-hand side under expenses, you'll see the little green dot on the left. That means it was just added to this plan and is only factoring in to the proposal. And then here, let's say I'm running the plan and this, $500, maybe the client wants to see $700. Wow, that is really making a difference. So let me just switch off that debt proposal and then we can see, okay, what is the new probability of success of making it to the end of the planning projection, factoring in that extra debt payment. So that's a lot of what happens is advisors will start off in the debt module, look at the different payment priorities, but then there's a lot of conversation that can also happen in the probability tab under the action items to really build out those different proposals. But that is a very popular one, is to show the client the true impact of making extra debt payments. Perfect. And I just want to remind everyone, please ask questions throughout the webinar. You should see a little Q&A field in Zoom. And then at the very end, we'll walk through all of those questions. So if you'd like me to review anything in more detail, just let me know. Awesome. So that is the retirement analysis and factoring in debt into here. So again, that debt strategy on the right-hand side, switching over debt proposal. And a lot of our strategies here bring information from that exact module and allow you to incorporate it back into the retirement analysis. And then on the left-hand side, adding those extra debt payments to show the true impact of paying down specific debt over time. So that is the retirement analysis and the debt portion that I wanted to review. And then I do want to hop over to our liquidity analysis. So over in our dashboard, up at the very top left of my screen, clicking into dashboard, and then we have liquidity. So this is another great module to review when evaluating debt on the financial plan. And roughly 25% of adults report having no emergency savings at all. And then another 29% have some cash saved, but less than enough to cover 3 months of expenses. So without even a modest cash flow buffer, many households rely on high interest credit cards or loans just to get by. So this is another great module to really talk through with the clients. What is their target liquidity? What is their actual liquidity? And do they run into any surplus or deficit? And again, this module is also based on the action items down below. So right below the graph under liquidity analysis, I'm clicking into those action items. And then on the left-hand side, we have our total current monthly expenses. Again, that's really auto-calculated based on the information that you or the client have entered in the profile section. And then here I can put an additional expense buffer. So maybe I want to make sure I have an additional $5,000 on top of that. And then we'll just add the current plus the proposed to give the total covered expenses. And then right below that is where we can adjust the liquidity target. So for example, standard 3 to 6 months is really where people should aim to have. So if I wanted to run 3 months, that would be 52,000. Then all I have to do is press refresh, and then I can see target liquidity is that 52,000. What is their actual liquidity? And then are we approaching a surplus or a deficit? And then if we wanted to bump that up, let's say, okay, let's make sure we have 6 months, for example. And again, just pressing refresh, and then that's telling a different story. So now we're short $38,000. So this can really be a great place, very simple to walk through with the client, but really a great visual to show, well, if something were to happen and you needed 6 months of covered expenses, we wouldn't have it. So this, again, changes that narrative to really focus on shifting and paying down that debt. So that is the action items. Again, just current monthly expenses. That's all auto-calculated based on the profile information. Do I want to adjust and have an additional expense buffer? Adding that up to be total covered expenses. And then I can use the slider to adjust what the liquidity target will be. So that is the summary portion of liquidity. And then on the right-hand side, next to summary up at the very top, we have our details tab, which I like to say is the numbers behind the visual. So this just goes over all of the current monthly expenses and then the current liquidity. So just more high level, exactly what the expenses are, and then current liquidity in the plan. So just a really great tool to really talk through. Do you have enough if something bad were to happen and you would rely on that liquid cash in your account? So that is liquidity. And up next, I'm going to go over to the budgeting module. This is another very hot topic. I just need to turn on one account just so I can activate it. So ignore me just for 2 seconds. I just have to add my linked account here. And then I'm heading over to the dashboard and then the budgeting module. So budgeting can be a hit or miss for different clients. Introducing a budget to clients who dislike budgeting is a common challenge for financial planners. Many people associate budgets with restriction or guilt or even complexity. So the key is really reframing budgeting in a way that aligns with their goals, values, and lifestyle. So before jumping in, I want to highlight some potential strategies for incorporating a budget into a financial plan with clients who may not want to go too far into the weeds. So if they do, that's awesome, and it makes budgeting a lot easier. But for some, it needs to be introduced gradually. So a common place to start is really to say, instead of a strict budget, let's build a spending plan that gives you confidence and clarity each month. So making budgeting goal-driven and not restrictive, and connecting it to the life they want, whether that's a specific retirement age or vacations or home purchases or supporting children's education, or maybe it's just to have peace of mind. So asking questions like, what would it feel like to take that trip or to be debt-free? Let's reverse engineer how to get there. So people resist budgeting when it feels overwhelming. So we can simplify it with graphs, pie charts, and dashboards to show spending. And that's really where our budget module comes into play. So here it's going to enable clients to set and track monthly budget goals and then integrate linked accounts to really monitor spending and categorize transactions. So the first place to start off in the dashboard budget tool is on the far right of the screen, clicking into the budget tab. So this is the first stop to actually establish the budget. So here the clients will see predetermined categories, but they can always add their own in the settings as well. But here is where I want to actually write down, okay, how much do I typically spend for auto or business or dining out or groceries or housing? So here, first thing is just to quickly get in all of the monthly expenses. So again, clients can always add their own, but we do have all of these as defaults. So very easy to click through the different categories. We'll automatically calculate what the total is each month, and then this can always be adjusted moving forward. So now that I've established the budget, then our summary, activities, and transactions tab really go into the weeds, but without overcomplicating things. So instead of overhauling everything in the budget, which clients tend to say, oh, I'm not interested in really going into the weeds on everything, we can zoom in on a few key areas. So maybe that's dining out is a problem, or subscriptions, or maybe I'm speaking for myself, the Amazon 2-day shipping is a problem with Amazon Prime. So many advisors frame this budgeting tool as a living tool that you and the clients can adjust together. So it's not something that's just imposed on them. So we see a lot of clients using this and also tracking their budget on our mobile app as well, which I'll go over in just a couple minutes. But really this helps simplify things without being so overwhelming. So first thing is to start with the budget here. And then as the month progresses, we will see on the left-hand side, a really nice visual of the current monthly budget. As the transactions flow into this module, we will then see this fill out. So on the right-hand side, we will see all of our budget transaction categories, and then we will see a nice kind of color scale of how close we're getting to reaching that budget. So if you'll see in the green, we're still good. Yellow, you'll see it's approaching, and then red means we've gone over budget. So this is just a great summary, very easy to read to see how much is the total budget being spent and how much is remaining. Activity is another great graph here. We can see activity over time. So we can break it down by expenses, income, net income, and then any other. And then we have great visuals to see activity over time and then prior activity by category. So we can also help the clients identify if there's specific categories where we tend to go over each month. And then I can also look at this month, the last 3 months, last 6 months, year to date, or if this is more of a long-term client, we can also see up to 2 years or even just customizing that. So again, it doesn't have to be overwhelming, and it can really highlight by specific category as well. So that is activity. And then a very helpful one is transactions. So if you are impersonating your clients, or if you're logged into their client plan and they do not share transactions, you will see a little note that says clients need to share their transactions. They just need to go into their settings and then just share transactions. We don't automatically share that with advisors, but once they do uncheck that and give advisors permission to see each transaction, this will update as they come in, and we can see the date of the transaction, the description, the account, category, and the amount. So very helpful here. I can retitle this description to whatever I'd like, and then I can also reassign a category. We do have category recognition. So let's say, I'm going to make this up, the client goes to Starbucks every day and it keeps putting it in other. The first time we recorrect it and say this is actually Starbucks and it goes into groceries or dining out, it will then learn that transaction, and then you won't have to come back, and the client won't have to come back to make any adjustments. So it does learn the same transaction if it has the same description. So again, just saving clients a lot of time. If it's exhausting every time they're in the transactions tab and they're like, I always have to recategorize this, that won't happen. It will learn itself, and then that's just another time saver there. So very easy to track those spending, those transactions every day. And also just making sure it's going into the correct category. And then on the left-hand side, I can isolate it by specific account that I have connected. I can also look at all expenses or just dial down to that specific category. Again, just coming back to that, I don't want to overwhelm the client, but we do have some budgeting problems. I can just isolate a specific category and just focus on that. And then lastly, I can also look at the time frame, and then I can also search transactions. So just, again, enabling clients really to track those monthly budget goals, but it's really not that overwhelming. So we get a lot of good feedback that it's not overwhelming. It's very easy to understand. Really just establish that budget. And then if you want to dial it down to just a specific category, or there are clients that really go into the weeds, which is awesome. But we really know that not everyone is going to go right off the bat and want to really deep dive into their budgeting. Again, a lot of complexity, restriction, and kind of set it and ignore it like it's not a problem, but this really can help highlight that. So this is the budgeting module. I do want to point out one nuance, that we do need at least one account connected through account aggregation. So that means the client needs to go into their profile tab up at the very top right of the screen, click into their net worth, and then use the link account option. So this is where they can connect their Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo. So we just need them to connect at least one account. And then in the budgeting module, they can enter manual accounts and track that as well. But we do just need one to start feeding in those transactions. I always like to point out we do have a lot of Help Center content on account aggregation and enabling the budget module, as well as sharing those transactions with the advisor. So a lot of content there. But very easy to connect accounts. Again, it's very nice to get all the accounts connected because they will automatically refresh in the profile net worth as well. So I don't have to track bank accounts manually. That will automatically update, which is nice. So it's kind of a twofold. Get all of the accounts entered into the net worth, so it streamlines data entry, and then back in the dashboard, we'll automatically get those transactions. And then lastly, when the client connects their account, we can typically pull up to 90 days worth of transactions. And then as time moves on, we will then have more transactions. So for example, if today I linked a Bank of America account, in my budgeting module, I'd see 90 days worth of transactions. And then as I continue to be a RightCapital client, then, if I'm connected for a year, I would then have a year worth of transactions. So just want to pull that note, kind of say that nuance as well. Awesome. So I know we went over a lot today. I do just want to quickly run through the kind of the top items that advisors really focus on when they're talking to clients about managing debt. So first stop is to go into the three dots, that more menu in the debt module. Really easy to show down below in the action items. What is our payment priority? Do I want to show highest to lowest interest rate, lowest to highest balance? Do the clients have any additional cash flows that they could pay towards that debt? And again, like we went over in the retirement analysis, if you want to just focus on paying down specific debts, that's where I can also use that extra debt payment. So I don't even have to factor it in here. And then lastly, just looking at individual loan strategies. Do I want to factor it into that payment strategy? Do I want to exclude it? Or do I even want to show the impacts of refinancing? So a very popular tool is, again, showing that refinance. The cost is the actual cost to do the refinance. Term and rate are the new rate for the refinance. And then the payment and details tab, again, I like to say is the number behind the visual to really get them to that point. And then that details tab is just individual loan, and then just paying that down either annual or monthly. So just more information there. Then the retirement analysis, a lot of advisors will spend time there. Again, one, building out multiple what if proposals, but really focusing on, in the action items on the right-hand side, bringing in that debt strategy. So again, switching over to debt proposal brings all the work I just did in that debt module into the retirement analysis. So I could factor it into the client's Monte Carlo and really see how does that impact the overall plan with all the other variables that I have entered. And then at the left-hand side, I can also add extra debt payments. So that's a very hot topic, is what would happen if I put an additional $500 to the principal of my mortgage? What does that do for the overall success of the financial plan? And to add those extra debt payments, you just click into that edit on the right-hand side where I can add or remove action items. And then at the very bottom left, that blue add new items is always adding things just to that proposed plan that you're working on. Click into expenses, and then you'll see the extra debt payment. Just fill out the relevant information, press save, and then you can then make any adjustments once it's in the action items. And then if I press save here, I can make those adjustments, and then I can look at an extra debt payment. But then let's say, okay, I have that $700, I'm paying down the loan, and then I can look at funding other goals because that mortgage is then paid off. So a lot of moving parts there, but great conversation and great visuals to show the clients. And then lastly is heading over to the dashboard tab, also focusing on liquidity. And I'm sorry, my internet is really giving me trouble. I'm so sorry. Let me just refresh this. I'm so sorry if it's glitching out. I'm back. This dashboard liquidity is another great stop, especially with younger clients, really to show them the impact of target liquidity, actual, and then, if that were to happen, where are we? And do we run into a surplus or deficit to really, plan for the unknown? The summary tab is a great visual to show that. And then the details tab really breaks down monthly expenses versus current liquidity. So just another great conversation piece. And then lastly, budgeting, really walking through a lot. Again, some clients tend not to want to go into budgeting too much, but this module is great introducing it. And really you can work with a range of clients here, either really nitty gritty, want to go over every transaction, or just some who, again, want to more goal driven, not restrictive. I want to make sure I can retire by 65, or I want to go on a vacation every year when I turn 65. So just reformatting that of what would it look like if you took that trip or you wanted to be debt free, and that reverse engineer how to actually get there. So lots of helpful information there, but really just starting off with the budget tab on the far right of the screen, and then the summary activities and transactions all aid that budget that was just created. And then lastly, just shouting out the mobile app. We do have a client-facing mobile app that they can go to the App Store. It's called RightCapital. They download it, enter the same credentials as they would on the desktop version. And then we have a great mobile app that captures a lot of information, but one being budgeting. So maybe they're always on the go. They use that I don't have time to create the budget. Well, maybe they have some time on the train commuting to work, or maybe at home while they're sitting on the couch, they can log into the mobile app. So lots of flexibility there as well. And I do want to just highlight, we have a great flyer for the mobile app as well. So I'm just going to go back out to my advisor portal, and up at the very top right of my screen, I'm clicking into help, which will bring you right to our help center. And then on the left-hand side of this help center home, we have our marketing and prospecting section. And under marketing and prospecting flyers at the very bottom, we have our mobile app. And I just want to download this and show you what clients can do, because this is really a selling point to get clients really involved in budgeting, because it's just so easy to do on their phone. So our mobile app gives them a nice dashboard. They'll have a budgeting tab, investments, tasks, as well as the vault. And I'm just going to scroll down because there's a bunch of great screenshots here. But here we can see in the middle of the page, I'll zoom in a little bit. We have our summary, activity, transactions, and budgeting. So everything we went over today can also be done on the phone. So we see a lot of success with advisors focusing on budgeting using the mobile app as well. And we always recommend, if you are an advisor and want to take a look at the mobile app, because it is client facing, that you just create yourself as a test client, use a separate Gmail or personal email, invite yourself, and then download the app just to see exactly what it would look like for the client as well. So lots of success there. But that wraps up the content portion for managing client debt. Again, I know debt isn't the most I should say it's not the topic that everyone wants to talk about, but it's definitely in everyone's life. So it's definitely something that has to be addressed, especially for financial planning. So lots of options in RightCapital to showcase what the client can do to really improve their financial plan.